Carl Jung's teachings reveal a profound truth. Most of what disturbs us in life doesn't come from the outside world, but from the unexplored territories within our own psyche. The people who trigger us, the situations that unravel us, the words that linger painfully in our minds, they all point to something deeper, something unhealed inside ourselves. This is the core of Jung's shadow work. The shadow isn't some abstract concept. It's the living, breathing part of you that you've been taught to disown. Maybe it's your anger, your vulnerability, your selfishness, or even your greatness. Whatever society, family, or your own inner critic labeled as unacceptable. But here's the paradox. The more you reject these parts, the more they control you from the shadows. That co-worker who grates on your nerves, that ex who left you feeling worthless. They're mirrors showing you what you still haven't made peace with in yourself. Jung didn't just theorize about this. He gave us a way out. The path isn't about becoming some idealized, flawless version of yourself. It's about radical honesty, sitting with the discomfort of your own contradictions. When you catch yourself reacting intensely to someone, that's the moment to pause and ask, what is this person showing me about myself? The answer won't always be comfortable, but it will always be freeing. This work goes deeper than positive thinking or willpower. It's about recognizing that your ego, the identity you've constructed to navigate the world, is both your protector and your jailer. The more attached you are to being the nice one, the victim, or the successful one, the more brittle you become when life challenges that image. But when you start to see your ego as a costume rather than your true self, something shifts. Criticism stops feeling like a threat. Rejection stops feeling like annihilation. Freud talked about the id, the chaotic primal part of the psyche, but Jung's shadow is broader. It's everything you've hidden away. Not just your dark impulses, but also your abandoned dreams, your silenced creativity, even the love you're afraid to give. Integration doesn't mean acting on every impulse. It means acknowledging these parts without letting them run the show. Try this. Next time you feel a sharp emotional reaction, whether it's anger, envy, or hurt, don't rush to blame the other person. Sit with the feeling. Ask it, what part of me is being activated here? You might discover that your judgment of a lazy friend hides your own exhaustion. Your irritation with a selfish partner might point to your own neglected needs. This isn't about excusing bad behavior, it's about reclaiming your power so others' actions don't dictate your inner world. Jung called this process individuation, the lifelong journey of becoming whole. It's not about fixing yourself, but about meeting yourself again and again with ruthless compassion. And when you do this consistently, something remarkable happens. The world loses its power to shake you, not because you've become numb, but because you've stopped fighting yourself. You realize that no one can define you unless you let them. No situation can break you unless you're already at war with some part of yourself. This isn't a one-time epiphany. It's a daily practice. It's looking at your reactions not as truths but as clues. It's catching yourself when you slip into old stories of blame and victimhood. It's daring to ask again and again, where am I giving my power away? Because the secret Jung uncovered wasn't just about psychology, it was about sovereignty. The less you reject within yourself, the less the world can use against you. And this is where most people stop, at the intellectual understanding. But the real transformation happens when you take this knowledge into the trenches of your life. When your boss dismisses you, instead of spiraling into self-doubt, you ask, what old wound is this touching? When a stranger's comment stings, you pause and wonder, why does this have a hook in me? This is how you dissolve the triggers, one honest reflection at a time. The irony? The parts of yourself you've been running from, the anger, the neediness, the imperfection, they hold the very energy you need to become unshakable. Your shadow isn't your enemy. It's your untapped strength. The more you bring it into the light, the less power it has to sabotage you, and the less you need others to behave a certain way for you to be at peace. This is the real spiritual secret, not some mystical bypass, but the hard, beautiful work of self-reclamation. It's realizing that the world doesn't make you feel anything. It reveals what's already there, and when you stop fearing what you find inside, nothing outside can ever truly shake you again. The journey doesn't end here, of course. There are layers to uncover, deeper patterns to examine. But this is where it begins, with the willingness to turn every reaction into a question, every conflict into a mirror, and every wound into a doorway. Because the ultimate freedom isn't controlling the world, it's no longer needing to. The wisdom of Carl Jung unveils a fundamental reality about human existence. The vast majority of our emotional turbulence doesn't originate from external circumstances, but rather from the uncharted depths of our own unconscious mind. Those individuals who provoke strong reactions in us, those circumstances that leave us emotionally unraveled, those cutting remarks that replay endlessly in our thoughts, they all serve as signposts pointing toward unresolved aspects of our inner landscape that demand our attention. This represents the very essence of what Jung termed shadow work, a process of confronting and integrating the disowned fragments of our psyche. The shadow self is far from being merely a theoretical construct. It's a vital, dynamic aspect of your being that you've systematically exiled from conscious awareness. Perhaps it contains your capacity for righteous anger, your fundamental human vulnerability, your natural self-interest, or even your latent potential for greatness, all those qualities that your upbringing, social conditioning, or internal judge deemed inappropriate or unworthy. Yet here lies the profound contradiction. The more vehemently we disown these aspects of ourselves, the more powerfully they dictate our lives from the hidden recesses of our psyche. That colleague whose mere presence irritates you, that former lover whose abandonment still haunts you, they function as living mirrors reflecting back at you precisely those qualities within yourself that you've refused to acknowledge and embrace. Jung didn't simply philosophize about this phenomenon, he provided a practical pathway for liberation. This transformative journey isn't about manufacturing some perfect, sanitized version of yourself. It's about cultivating radical self-honesty, developing the capacity to remain present with the discomfort of your own internal contradictions. When you notice yourself having an intense emotional reaction to someone, that precise moment becomes an opportunity for profound inquiry. Pause and ask yourself with genuine curiosity, what aspect of my own being is this person revealing to me? The insights that emerge may not always feel comfortable, but they invariably lead toward greater psychological freedom. This inner work transcends superficial approaches like positive affirmations or brute willpower. It requires recognizing that your ego, that carefully constructed identity you present to the world, serves simultaneously as both guardian and prison. The more rigidly you cling to labels like the agreeable one, the perpetual victim, or the high achiever, the more fragile you become when life inevitably challenges these self-definitions. But when you begin to perceive your ego not as your true essence, but rather as a protective mask you wear, a fundamental shift occurs. Criticism ceases to feel like a personal attack. Rejection no longer carries the sting of existential annihilation. While Freud focused on the id, that primitive, instinctual dimension of the psyche, Jung's concept of the shadow encompasses a far broader territory. It contains not just our repressed desires and aggressive impulses, but also our abandoned aspirations, our stifled creative energies, even our deepest capacities for love that we're afraid to express. The process of integration doesn't mean indiscriminately acting on every impulse. It means bringing conscious awareness to these disowned parts without allowing them to operate autonomously in the shadows. Consider experimenting with this approach. The next time you experience a sudden surge of emotion, whether it manifests as rage, jealousy, or profound hurt, resist the automatic tendency to project blame outward. Instead, create space to sit with the feeling. Engage it in dialogue by asking, which exiled part of myself is being activated here? You might uncover that your harsh judgment of a lazy acquaintance actually masks your own chronic exhaustion and need for rest. Your irritation with a selfish romantic partner might actually be pointing toward your own long-neglected emotional needs. This practice isn't about justifying poor behavior in others. It's about reclaiming sovereignty over your emotional landscape so that external events no longer dictate your internal state of being. Jung named this transformative process individuation, the lifelong pilgrimage towards psychological wholeness. It's not about fixing or perfecting yourself, but rather about encountering yourself repeatedly with unflinching yet compassionate awareness. When you commit to this practice with consistency, something extraordinary begins to unfold. The external world gradually loses its capacity to destabilize you, not because you've become emotionally numb or detached, but because you've ceased being at war with yourself. You come to realize that no other person has the power to define you unless you grant them that power. No circumstance can truly break you unless you're already engaged in an internal civil war with aspects of your own nature. This represents far more than a momentary insight. It's an ongoing discipline that requires daily engagement. It involves learning to view your emotional reactions not as absolute truths, but as valuable diagnostic information about your inner state. It means catching yourself when you unconsciously slip into familiar narratives of blame and victimhood. It demands the courage to continually inquire, in what ways am I surrendering my personal power? Because the essential truth Jung discovered extends beyond psychological theory. It's about achieving genuine self-governance. The less you reject and disown within yourself, the fewer weapons the world has to use against you. Most people stall at this juncture, content with intellectual comprehension, but unwilling to take the next step. True transformation only occurs when you apply this understanding in the messy reality of daily living. When your employer dismisses you abruptly, instead of descending into self-doubt, you might ask, which childhood wound is this situation touching upon? When an offhand comment from a stranger stings unexpectedly, you might pause to investigate. Why does this particular remark have such resonance for me? This is how we gradually dissolve our emotional triggers, through patient, honest self-examination repeated over time. The great irony: those very aspects of yourself you've spent years avoiding, the anger that frightens you, the neediness that shames you, the imperfections you hide, contain precisely the raw materials you need to develop unshakable inner strength. Your shadow isn't an enemy to be defeated. It's a reservoir of untapped potential waiting to be harnessed. The more you bring these disowned parts into the light of conscious awareness, the less power they have to sabotage you unconsciously. And the less dependent you become on others, behaving in specific ways for you to maintain your inner equilibrium. This constitutes the authentic spiritual secret, not some esoteric shortcut, but the challenging yet beautiful work of reclaiming your fragmented self. It's the realization that the world doesn't actually make you feel anything. It simply reveals what already exists within you. When you finally stop fearing what you might discover in your own depths, nothing in the external environment can ever truly destabilize you again. Naturally, the journey doesn't conclude at this point. There are always deeper layers to explore, more subtle patterns to uncover. But this marks the essential starting point, cultivating the willingness to transform every emotional reaction into a question worth investigating, every interpersonal conflict into an opportunity for self-reflection, and every psychological wound into a portal for growth. Because the ultimate form of freedom isn't about controlling external circumstances. It's about reaching a place where you no longer require the world to conform to your expectations in order to remain at peace. The path continues as we delve deeper into the profound transformation Samuel underwent. Represents far more than just one man's journey. It mirrors the universal human struggle with our hidden selves. His story illustrates that true liberation doesn't come from defeating our darkness, but from embracing it with courageous awareness. Jung's psychology reveals that what we resist persists, and Samuel's experience proves that when we finally stop running from our shadow, we discover it was never our enemy, but rather a neglected teacher. The stages of Samuel's awakening provide a roadmap for psychological integration that anyone can follow. His initial state of unconsciousness, where he derived his identity entirely from external validation, is where most people remain trapped their entire lives. Like Samuel before his crisis, we build fragile identities based on job titles, relationships, and social perceptions, never realizing these are merely costumes we wear rather than our true essence. The painful collapse of Samuel's world wasn't random misfortune. It was his psyche's desperate attempt to break through his illusions, what Jung called the unconscious seeking consciousness. What makes Samuel's story particularly powerful is how it demonstrates the paradoxical nature of shadow work. The very qualities he most feared in himself, his anger, his neediness, his pride, contained the seeds of his strength when properly integrated. His journey from projection, "my boss is the problem," to ownership, "this reaction reveals something in me," marks the critical turning point in psychological maturity. That moment when he stood before the mirror vocalizing his deepest fears wasn't weakness. It was the bravest act of self-reclamation. The practical techniques Samuel used, journaling, mirror work, conscious pausing, are more than therapeutic exercises. They're alchemical processes for transforming leaden fears into golden awareness. His ability to later face his former boss with neutrality rather than resentment proves shadow work isn't about intellectual understanding, but embodied wisdom. This distinction is crucial. Many people grasp these concepts mentally but fail to live them when triggered. Samuel shows us that real change is measured by our capacity to meet old triggers with new responses. Perhaps the most beautiful evolution in Samuel's story is his development of compassion, not the superficial kind we force, but the organic understanding that comes from recognizing our shared human struggle. When he stopped seeing his boss as a villain, and instead as another wounded soul battling unseen shadows, he demonstrated the highest fruit of integration. This compassion wasn't altruism. It was the natural consequence of no longer needing to defend his ego at every turn. The practical applications of Samuel's journey are timeless. Keeping a shadow journal where we document our emotional triggers creates a mirror to our unconscious. The mirror exercise, though initially uncomfortable, builds radical self-honesty. The 5-second pause before reacting develops the observing ego that can witness rather than be consumed by emotions. These practices aren't quick fixes, but lifelong disciplines that gradually rewire our relationship with ourselves and others. What makes this approach so revolutionary is that it doesn't require changing external circumstances to find peace. As Samuel discovered, when we stop rejecting parts of ourselves, the world loses its power to destabilize us. A critical insight emerges. No one can insult you unless part of you believes the insult. No situation can break you unless it touches an unhealed fracture within. This isn't about becoming emotionless, but about developing the capacity to experience emotions without being hijacked by them. The ultimate lesson of Samuel's story is that emotional freedom comes not from perfecting ourselves, but from wholeheartedly accepting ourselves, light and shadow alike. His transformation proves that our wounds aren't obstacles to healing, but the very portals through which healing enters. When we stop fighting our darkness, we discover it was never the enemy, just unclaimed strength waiting to be integrated into our conscious being. This journey requires daily courage, the willingness to meet each reaction with curiosity rather than judgment, to see every conflict as a mirror rather than an attack, and to embrace our messy humanity without shame. As Samuel learned, the peace we seek doesn't come from controlling life's storms, but from discovering the unshakable center within ourselves that no storm can disturb. This is Jung's timeless gift, not a path to perfection, but a homecoming to our complete, authentic selves. The invitation remains open to all who dare to turn inward and whisper to their shadows, "I see you, I accept you, I am ready to learn what you came to teach me."